Hello everyone, I am Nitina R. Jacob and I'll be conducting today's study circle. The topic that I have chosen for today's session is company audit. The books that I have referred for this session is only the study material applicable for CA Intermediate new syllabus. I have not included any topics other than that given in the study material. So for those students who are going to write the upcoming exams, this video might be really helpful. So let's go to the topic. Okay, so let's start our topic, company audit. Before going deeper into the topic, let us first simply understand what company audit is. A company by the end of the year has to furnish its financial statements, as we all know. The financial statement is the ultimate position, or it shows the ultimate position of that company by the end of the year. And there are many users who are in need of these financial statements. In order for the financial statements to be true and fair or true and correct, we appoint certain auditors to check these statements. This whole process, in simple words, are called company audit. I just explained it in a very small manner, but there are many elements covered in this area. Company audit is a part of the Companies Act 2013 and there are many sections covered in this area. So let's go through those sections, or let's go through all the areas that are covered in the session. Okay, so these are the sections that are covered in this area. I'll be going section by section so that you'll be able to keep a track of the section and you'll be able to remember the section number easily. So I'll just read out the sections one by one. The first area that we are going to cover is 139, section 139, appointment of auditor. Then 140, removal, resignation of auditor and giving of special notice. Eligibility, qualifications and disqualification of auditors. Section 142, remuneration of auditors. Section 143, powers and duties of auditors and auditing standard. Section 144, auditor not to render certain services. Section 145, auditors to sign audit reports. Section 146, auditor to attend general meeting. Section 147, punishment for contravention. And Section 148, central government to specify audit of items of cost in respect of certain companies, that is cost audit. So these are the sections that we are going to cover, starting from appointment till punishment and cost audit. It is all in a very serial order, or it's all given in an order. So studying this way might help you in remembering things much easier. So let's start with our first area, appointment of auditor. So let's start our first section, section 139, appointment of auditor. In this section, we will be having total of 11 subsections. I will not be taking it in an order because it might be of a little bit confusion. So we will be going group by group. So let's start with our first area on how the auditor is appointed. Okay. So appointment of an auditor can be divided into two. That is, there are two different types of appointments. The first one is appointment of first auditor and the appointment of subsequent auditors. And the companies can be divided into two. That is, one is government company and the other can be company other than government company. Right now we are going to deal with companies other than government company. So in the case of a company other than government company, the first auditor shall be appointed by the board of directors within 30 days from the date of registration. Please keep in mind of those small areas which can be really useful for MCQs for our exam. So the board of directors shall appoint the auditor within 30 days from the registration of the company. In case the board of directors fail to do so, The members shall appoint the auditor in an extraordinary general meeting within the next 90 days. Okay, and such an auditor who is appointed shall hold the office till the conclusion of the first AGM. Okay, so this area is dealt with in section 139 subsection 6. And in the case of appointment of subsequent auditors, he shall be appointed by the members in an AGM. He shall hold the office from first AGM, that is conclusion of first AGM, till the conclusion of sixth AGM. Okay, so the member shall appoint the auditor, the subsequent auditor, by the end of the first AGM, and he shall hold office for the next 5 years. This area is dealt with in section 139(1). Now let's see what is the case with government company. Now in the case of a government company, the first auditor shall be appointed by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India within 60 days from the date of registration. In case the Comptroller and Auditor General of India is not able to appoint an auditor within the time limit, the Board of Directors shall appoint the auditor within the next 30 days. And in case the board also fails to appoint the auditor within that time, the members shall appoint the auditor within the next 60 days in an EGM. Okay, so first 60 days time is taken by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, then 30 days time period can be taken by Board of Directors, and the members shall take 60 days, another 60 days. This area is dealt with in section 139 subsection 7. Now the subsequent auditor is also appointed by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, and he shall be appointed within 180 days from the commencement of the financial year, not the end, the commencement of the financial year. And that auditor shall hold office till the conclusion of that AGM, the next AGM. Okay, and this area shall be dealt in section 139(5). So to be precise, we are dealing with subsection 6, 1, 7 and 5. We have completed these many sections. Now we shall deal with another important section, that is section 139(2), subsection 2, rotation of auditors. We shall see who are all applicable for rotation of auditors. The first set is listed companies, and the next one is all companies belonging to such class as may be prescribed. So what are these companies that are prescribed by the government? Let's see. As per Rule 5 of Companies Audit and Auditors Rules 2014, all the unlisted public company having share capital of rupees 10 crore or more, all the private limited companies whose paid up share capital is rupees 50 crore or more. Now, those companies whose share capital is less than the 10 crore or more in case of unlisted public company, or less than 50 crore or more in case of private limited company, if they have a if they have a public borrowing from a financial institution or a bank or a public deposit of rupees 50 crore or more, they are also applicable for rotation of auditors. So in short, listed companies, unlisted public companies having share capital rupees 10 crore or more, private limited companies having paid up share capital rupees 50 crore or more, the above mentioned companies which are having public borrowings or public borrowings from financial institutions, banks or public deposits of rupees 50 crore or more are eligible for rotation of auditors. And the few people who are not eligible are 1% companies and small companies. they are not eligible for rotation of auditors.
Now we shall see the manner of rotation of auditors, or the manner in which the auditors are rotated in the company. In case of an individual who works as an auditor, he shall not be appointed or reappointed in that company for more than one term of 5 consecutive years. That is, he can work in a company for a total of 5 continuous years. After that, he shall not be eligible to work as an auditor in that company for the next 5 years. That is, he will be given a cool off period of 5 years, and only after that completion, only after the term of 5 years has been completed, that is, after his term, he has to wait for another 5 years, and only after that he shall be eligible to be appointed as an auditor of that company. Now, in case of a firm which has been appointed as an auditor of a company, they shall not be appointed or reappointed in that company for more than 2 terms of 5 consecutive years. That is a total of 10 years. And after this 10 years is completed, they also will be provided with a cool off period of 5 years. That is, they cannot be appointed as an auditor for 5 years in that company.
Now, only after 5 years, the firm shall be eligible to be appointed as auditor of that company. Now, there are certain points to be noted in the during the rotation of auditors. One such point is, audit firm with one or more common partners to another audit firm whose tenure has expired shall not be appointed as an auditor of that company until the completion of 5 years. Let's take an example. Say Mr. X works as an auditor or is a partner of audit firm A, and he is also a partner of audit firm B. Now, audit firm B is working as an auditor of a company. Now, audit firm B has already completed the term of 10 years in that company, and in that case, the auditor as an individual, auditor Mr. X, who is an individual, will not be able to work as an auditor for the next 5 years until he completes the cool off period of 5 years. So that is the first thing that has to be kept in mind. The second point is, if 2 or more audit firms have common partners, and if one of those firms have completed the tenure of 10 years in a company, none of the firms shall be eligible to be appointed as an auditor of the for next 5 years. For example, if audit firm A and audit firm B have similar partners or common partners, and audit firm B has already completed the tenure of 10 years in a company, then audit firm A shall not be eligible to work as an auditor in that company for the next 5 years. They have to wait for the next 5 years to work as an auditor in that company. Now, the next point that we have to take care of is, every company existing on or before the commencement of this Act who are required to comply with the provisions of rotation shall have to comply within 3 years from the commencement of this Act. This is a very important point that has to be taken care of. It says that the law which was commenced on 2013, all those companies that are eligible, or all those companies for whom rotation of auditors are applicable, they have to comply it within the next 3 years. That is, for example, there is a company who has already finished 5 years of term, or there is an individual auditor who has already finished 5 years of term in a specific company on the date of commencement of this Act. Then he will be given another 3 years to comply with this Act. That is, he can totally work there in that company for 8 years and not more than that. Say that person has worked only for 1 year in that company during the commencement of this act, then that person shall be able to work as an auditor of that company for the next 4 years only, because it also includes a 3-year transition period. So that is what this thing states, this point states. Now in case of a audit firm, it includes 10 years. That is if a company or if an audit firm has completed the tenure of 10 years in that company on the date of commencement of this act, then that company can still work for another 3 years in that company. That is a total of 13 years in that company. That's it. Now the next point is the right of the company to remove the auditor, or the right of the auditor to resign from such an office of the company shall not be prejudiced. That is the next point. Now, as per section 139 subsection 3, the members of the company shall decide that the auditing partner and his team shall be rotated at such intervals. They are the one that decides on such matters, and they also decide that the audit shall be conducted by more than one auditor or not. These are the matters that are decided by the members. Now section 139 subsection 4 states that the central government may by rules prescribe the manner in which the company shall rotate the auditors. The members decide whether the auditors have to be rotated or not in such and such intervals, but the central government decides on the manner in which these auditor has to be rotated. Now, Rule 6 of Audit and Auditors Rules 2014 states that as per section 139(11), where the company is required to constitute an audit committee under section 177, the audit committee shall recommend to the board the name of the auditor or audit firm upon completion of term of previous auditor, and the board shall consider the recommendation of audit committee, or in other cases shall itself recommend the next auditor by members in the next AGM. We shall discuss this point after we get to know about audit committee a bit more. So let's see what an audit committee is as per section 177. So audit committee can be constituted by the following companies only. They have to be constituted by every listed company and every other public company having paid up share capital of rupees 10 crores or more, or any other public company having turnover of rupees 100 crore or more, or any other public company having aggregate outstanding loans or borrowings or debentures or deposits of more than rupees 50 crore or more. So this is the criteria for where you have to constitute an audit committee or not. Now, what are the composition of audit committee, or who all are involved in an audit committee? Let's see that. There should be minimum 3 directors in an audit committee, minimum 3 directors, and majority of these directors should be independent auditors, that is at least 2 of them should be independent directors. And majority of the members, including the chairperson, shall be able to read and also understand the financial statements. The chairman shall also be an independent director. So these are some of the few points to be noted, and also these are the members that constitute an audit committee. Now we'll go back to the point that we were discussing earlier, that is the manner and procedure of selection of auditors for appointment. In the cases where the audit committee is constituted, the audit committee should recommend the auditor to the board for consideration. Now, there can be two different cases that the board may agree to this consideration or not. Now, if the board agrees to the consideration, then it shall go normal. The board shall further recommend this recommendation to the members in the AGM. Now, if the board of directors disagree with this recommendation, then they shall refer back the recommendation for reconsideration by stating the proper reason for such referring back or for referring back such recommendation. Now there can be two more other possibilities. The audit committee may accept the reason given by board of directors or may not. Now if they do not consider the reason or they are not satisfied with the reason given by the board, then they shall say that it's not possible to change the auditor, and now the board has to decide on what to do. If the board still stand firm on their own decision that they are not willing to agree with the recommendation given by the audit committee, in that case the board shall record the reason for reconsideration or for consideration and for this disagreement also with the committee and send its own recommendation for consideration to the members of AGM, members in the AGM. They can send their own recommendation. In the case where the audit committee, after considering the reasons, they do not reconsider the recommendation. Now the board decides that okay, it's okay to consider the recommendation given by the committee. Then the board can further move on with the recommendation given by the audit committee and present that recommendation to the members at the AGM. Now let's deal with how casual vacancy is filled, and this area is covered under section 139 subsection 8. What is a casual vacancy? It is a vacancy that is arising due to retirement or death or any other reason. That is, in this case, an auditor is stepping back before the completion of his tenure. That's it. Now, in the case of a government company, such casual vacancy shall be filled by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India within 30 days. And if the Comptroller and Auditor General of India does not fill the vacancy within the 30 days time period, then the Board of Directors shall fill the casual vacancy within next 30 days. In case of a company other than the government company, such casual vacancy shall be filled by the Board of Directors within 30 days. Now, in the case where the casual vacancy was occurred due to the resignation of the auditor, then the board shall fill the vacancy within 30 days as normal, but also the appointment of the next auditor, the appointment of that auditor shall be approved in the general meeting, which shall be convened within 3 months of the recommendation of the board. Please keep that point in mind. 3 months from the recommendation of the board. Now, as per section 139 subsection 9, which explains regarding the reappointment of a retiring auditor, it states that a retiring auditor can also be reappointed at an AGM if 3 points are satisfied. That is, he is not disqualified for reappointment. That is, he does not have any kind of disqualifications for reappointment, and he has not given a notice for his unwillingness to be reappointed. That is, he personally doesn't want to be reappointed in that company. Or in a case where a special resolution has not been passed at an AGM regarding the appointment of another auditor, or that he shall not be appointed, expressly stating that he shall not be reappointed. In these 3 cases, other than these 3 cases, a retiring auditor can be reappointed at an AGM. Now section 139(10) states that if at an AGM no auditor is appointed or reappointed, in that case the present auditor shall continue to be the auditor of that company. With this we have completed our first section, that is section 139, appointment of auditor. Now let's move on to the next section.
Section 140, removal, resignation of auditor and giving special notice. Now section 140 subsection 1 deals with removal of the auditor before the expiry of his term. Now every auditor who was appointed can be removed from his office or may be removed from his office before the expiry of his term, but only through a special resolution by the company. But there is a little process that has to be followed by the company before doing so. That is, certain previous approval of the central government should be taken by the company. For that, first the board must pass a resolution, and within the next 30 days they shall send an application for approval to the central government. Now the central government may approve such application provided by the company, and within the next 60 days the company shall hold a general meeting in order to pass a special resolution. Now as per section 140 subsection 2, which deals with resignation of an auditor, in case of government company, the auditor shall file a statement to the company and also to the registrar within a period of 30 days from the date of his resignation. And he should also file a statement with the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Obviously he has to, because they are the one who appoints him. So he has to file a statement with the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. He should also indicate specific reasons for his resignation, and if there are any other facts relating to such resignation, he has to state that also. Now in the case of a company other than government company, he doesn't have to do nothing much. He just has to file a statement with the company and also with the registrar within 30 days. That's it. Now section 140 subsection 3 states that if the auditor does not follow subsection 2 of this section, then he shall be punishable with a fine which shall not be less than 50,000 rupees, but which may extend to 5 lakh rupees. Now section 140 subsection 4 deals with appointment of auditor other than the retiring auditor. To be precise, this section deals with more of how not to appoint the retiring auditor. That is, a special notice shall be required for a resolution at an AGM which states that certain auditor has to be appointed, or such stating that the retiring auditor shall not be appointed or shall not be reappointed. And this case is applicable only in the case where the retiring auditor has not completed his tenure. Once such notice has been of resolution has been received, the company shall send this to the retiring auditor, send this copy of such a notice to the retiring auditor. Now if the retiring auditor gives to the auditor, retiring auditor makes a written representation and requests its notification to the members of the company, that they request that such a written representation to be given to each and every members of the company, then all the notices in any other notice given by the company in the next period, then such notice of the resolution given to members should state the fact of such representation have been made. That in the notice they have to specify that such a representation was made by the auditor earlier, and now they should also send a copy of that representation to all the members to whomever such notice was given. So to be precise, I'll repeat that again. In any notice which was given early or which is to be given, any single notice, such a statement has to be specified that the auditor has given a representation in writing regarding his appointment or reappointment has been given, and they have to send, the company has to individually send a copy of the representation to every member to whomsoever such notice was given. Now, if such representation was not being able to send or was not sent because it was received late, then the auditor may require that the representation shall be read out at the meeting. Only in that case the auditor can require that. And if the copy of representation is not sent as said before, that the copy was just read out in the meeting, then the copy of that shall be filed with the register. Now, in a certain case, if the tribunal is satisfied on an application made either by the company, that the company or any other aggrieved person states that the rights which were given to the auditor through section 140 subsection 4 of the Companies Act 2013 were abused by the auditor, and the tribunal feels that they are saying the truth, then the copy of such representation need not be sent and the representation need not be read at the meeting. Now, as per section 140 subsection 5, which deals with the directions given by tribunal, the tribunal, either by himself or by an application given by the central government or any other aggrieved person, he is satisfied that the auditor of the company has committed a fraud, then the tribunal can direct the company to change its auditors immediately. Now, if the application is made by the central government and the tribunal is satisfied that such a change of auditor is required, then it shall within 15 days of such application make an order that the auditor shall not function anymore, and the central government may appoint another auditor in that place. So there are few points that has to be specifically taken care of. The central government's role here is very important. Now we are moving on to a very interesting and also a very important part of this whole session, that is eligibility, qualification and disqualification of an auditor. In this section, I will be going in the order of subsection so that we will be able to remember the subsections also easily. Section 141 deals with eligibility, qualifications and disqualifications of an auditor. Now we will straight away go to the first subsection, that is subsection 1 of section 141, which states who shall be appointed as an auditor. Being an individual, only a chartered accountant shall be eligible to be appointed as an auditor. In case of a firm, the majority of those chartered accountants working in that firm shall be practicing in India. To be precise, they should be a chartered accountant and majority of them should be working and practicing in India. Now, as per section 141(2), which states more about a limited liability partnership, in case of a firm including a limited liability partnership is appointed as an auditor of a company, only those partners who are chartered accountants shall be authorized to act or sign on behalf of the firm. That is, the signing authority has only been given to the chartered accountant.
So let's start with section 141 subsection 3, which states about disqualification of an auditor. So the coming points that I'm going to mention are the following people are not eligible to work as an auditor in a company. The first person is a body corporate except LLP. We mentioned regarding LLP just before in the before section. Now a body corporate cannot be appointed as an auditor of a company. The next is an officer or an employee of that company cannot be appointed as an auditor of the company. And the next point states that if there is a person who was a partner or employee of that partner or employee who is working in that company, they are also not eligible to work as an auditor in that company. The next point is a person or his relative or his partner is holding a security in the company or its subsidiary or its holding company or associate company or subsidiary of such holding company. So not only in that company but also its subsidiary or holding or associate or subsidiary of such holding company. If a person or his relative or his partner is holding a share, then they are not eligible to be an auditor in that company. Now, who is a relative? It states that there is an exemption for relatives. That is, a relative may hold the security in that company with face value not exceeding rupees 1 lakh. That is, even a single rupee more than rupees 1 lakh shall make them ineligible for appointment. And if the relative acquires the limit of rupees 1 lakh, then that auditor shall take actions within the next 60 days or he might be disqualified for his position. Now, who is a relative? Who are all inclusive in this term? Relatives. It can be mother, father, husband, wife, stepmother, stepfather, son, daughter, stepson but not stepdaughter, son's wife, daughter's husband, brother or sister, and stepbrother and stepsister. So these are the persons who can be termed as a relative in case of an individual, and in case of an HUF, all the members of an HUF can be considered as relatives. So they are only having an exemption. The partner or the person shall not be able to hold even a single rupee of face value in that company. The next part is also the same, that is a partner or relative or that person, the person or his partner or his relative is indebted in excess of rupees 5 lakh to the company or its subsidiary or holding or associate or subsidiary of such holding company. Not only that company but all these subsidiary holding, associate, subsidiary of such holding company, all these companies, if they are indebted to a company, all are indebted to that company for rupees 5 lakh or more, then that auditor shall not be eligible for becoming an auditor in that company. Now, if that auditor or his partner or his relative has given a guarantee or provided any security to a third person in case of some debt or something in excess of rupees 1 lakh to that company or its subsidiary or holding or associate or subsidiary of such holding company, then he shall be disqualified. Okay, so let me remind certain points regarding the point that I mentioned before regarding indebtedness in excess of rupees 5 lakh in that company. See, even if that debt is in the ordinary course of business, that even if the term of the debt is the term of the credit period is in the ordinary course of business also, it is an indebtedness. So even if it is in that case also, he shall be disqualified. Now, if an auditor is claiming his fees in a progressive basis, like in monthly basis, if he is recovering his fees, then it shall not be a part of this section. That means he need not vacate his office. He is still eligible to be working as an auditor. The next subsection or the area states that a person or a firm who, whether directly or indirectly, has a business relationship with the company or its subsidiary or its holding or associate or subsidiary of such holding company or associate company. Now, what is a business relationship? A business relationship can be any transaction made for any commercial purpose, but there are certain exemptions to that. That is, if the auditor is providing any professional services which are eligible or which are permitted under this act, then it shall not be considered as a disqualification for that auditor. It is very normal. Now, in some other cases, if the auditor is entering into a transaction which is in the ordinary course of business, or it is normally happening in that company, that for example he is buying certain products from that company in for the normal rate, that is in the ordinary course of business, he is buying it in the original rate, he is not having any extra relationship with that company, he's just buying those products from that company or buying certain services from that company, then that is not a problem. That shall not be considered as business relationship in this context. Now the next area states that a person who is a relative and is a director or is in employment of the company as a director or key manager person, obviously he shall not be eligible for working as an auditor in that company. Now the next disqualification is that a person who is in full-time employment elsewhere, that is he is working in for full-time in some other place, then he shall not be eligible. And it also states that if on the date, say if an auditor is going to be appointed as an auditor of a company, and on that date he is already an auditor, he is already working as an auditor in 20 different other companies, then he shall not be eligible to work as an auditor in that company. That is, he might be disqualified, he shall be disqualified. Now there are certain companies that are not included in this 20 company block, that is, you need not consider them while counting your limit for the audit. And these companies are one-person companies, dormant companies, small companies, and private limited companies whose paid up share capital is less than 100 crore. That is, most of the small companies that are available in the society right now are not included in the purview of this 20 company limit. Now the above mentioned exemption is available for that company only in the case where the company has not committed any default in filing their financial statements or the annual return. They have to file it in the correct time, and they have not filed it, they are not committing any default in that. In that case only they will be exempted from this limit. Now if an auditor has already been convicted by court for an offence that involves fraud, not just any offence, but that offence which involves fraud, and after that conviction 10 years has not elapsed, then he shall not be eligible for appointment as an auditor in that company. Now the next disqualification is that there are certain services that are given by the section in the section 144 that we are going to discuss later on. In those areas they have specified certain services that are not to be rendered by an auditor. So if an auditor renders such services to that company on that date of appointment, then he shall not be eligible to work as an auditor in that company. It need not be himself, it can be the firm's he need not provide the service to that company alone. Even if he is providing services to the subsidiary or associate or holding or any other such form of company, then also he shall be ineligible to work as an auditor in that company. Now the next section that we are going to deal with is section 142, that is remuneration for auditors. The remuneration of the auditor shall be fixed in the general meeting by the board of directors. And what all are the elements that are included in remuneration? One is the fees payable to the auditor. The second one is the expenses that is incurred by the auditor in connection with the audit, or any other facility that is provided to the auditor in connection with the audit. All these shall be inclusive in the term remuneration for this section. Now, if there is any other services rendered by the auditor to the company, and on that behalf if he is receiving any kind of remuneration, then such a remuneration shall not be part of the remuneration in this section. Okay. The next section that we are going to deal with is section 143, that is powers and duties of auditors and auditing standards. Okay, so section 143.1 deals with the rights and duties of an auditor. Now, the first right is the right of access to books. That is, being an auditor, you can have the right to ask for the books of accounts from the company at any time. Even if the books are kept at the register office or at the company, you have the right to ask the officers regarding the availability of books, and you can seek any information or explanation required from the officers. Now, the other point that has to be noted that the term officer as per section 2 clause 59 states that an officer can also include the manager or the director or key managerial person or any person who on whose decisions or on whose controls the board of director works. Now, in case if there is a branch for the company, the auditor's right also extends to the branch also. That is, he can ask for the books of accounts of the branch also. He can ask for the branch accounts also. The next important right of an auditor is the right to obtain information and explanation from the officers. Such a right is really important for the auditor in order to provide the correct opinion. That is, an auditor may not be able to find all the required information from the books of accounts and other documents provided to him. So he will have to inquire with the officers of that company with regards with certain information that he requires. And in that case, if the in a case where the officers refuse to provide with such information or explanation, then the only option that will be left with the auditor is to report to the members of the company in order to get the possible actions from them. Now, the third point in this subsection is not a right but a duty. So in total, this subsection consists of 2 rights and 1 duty. And the main duty of auditor in this subsection is the duty to make inquiries. So the first inquiry is, the auditor has to check whether the company has made any loans and advances, and whether the loans and advances made by the company are properly secured, and if so, and if not so also, he has to see whether the loans and advances taken are according to the norms or the rules and regulations followed by the company itself. Now, the second inquiry that he has to make is whether the transaction of the company, which are properly given in the books of accounts, or which are given in the entries, given as entries, are according to the norms and rules and regulations followed by the company. And the third inquiry that has to be made by the officer, by the auditor, is that if the company is not an banking company or an investment company, it is not a banking company or an investment company, and whether the assets of that company are sold at a price less than the price at which it was purchased.
I hope you understand. That is, the company is not an investment company, the company is not a banking company, but if whether the company has sold its assets to another person at a price less than the price at which it was purchased. The next inquiry that has to be made by the auditor is he has to check whether the or inquire whether the loans and advances that are made by the company has been shown as deposits or not. The next inquiry is whether the personal expenses has been charged in the revenue account or not. Now the next inquiry that has to be made by the auditor is that if the books and documents of that company shows that there was an allotment made with cash, in cash, or for cash, in that case you need to inquire that the cash has actually been received in respect of such allotment or not, and if it has not been received, whether such an information is correctly shown in the balance sheet or not, and the financial position is properly shown in the accounts, and it is correct and not misleading. These information has to be inquired from the officers. Now, if the auditor of a company is an auditor of a holding company, that company is a holding company, then that auditor has the right to access of all the books of accounts of that subsidiary company with respect to all those informations required by him for making the consolidated financial statements. Only those part of books of accounts can be accessed by the auditor. Another important point that has to be kept in mind is that as far as the points mentioned in subsection 1 of section 143, the auditor need not report each and every point in his report. He need not point out all these points in his report if it's all going properly or it's going in a normal manner. If any adverse effect has been taken place, or if any adverse action has been taken place with regards to all these points that has been mentioned before, then he can point out only those points which were wrongly done, or if any adverse action has been taken place, he can point out and report on only such matter.
Now the next subsection is subsection 2 of section 143, which states the rights to report to the member, that the right of the auditor to report to the members. We all know that the most important right of an auditor is to report or to create an audit report and present it to the members of the company. Okay. Now, the auditor shall make the report to the members of the company on what? On the accounts examined by him and on the financial statements which were to be or which are to be presented in the company in the general meeting. So he has to make the report on the accounts that were examined by him. Now, on what basis shall he create the report? On what basis shall he report or create the report? He shall create the report by taking into account or taking into consideration all the rules and regulations of the company, all the accounting standards and standards of auditing that are to be followed by the company, all the other rules or any other provisions made under this act. All of these things has to be taken into account by the auditor while making this report. And the main part is that he has to present this report on the best of his information and knowledge. That is, he has to present every single thing that he has collected, that he knows that it is the correct information, that he knows that this is the best of the information and knowledge that I have collected. That is, it has to be true and fair. The thing is that the report is by the end of the year, the reports shall state the true and fair view of the state of the company's affairs by the end of the year. and it has to state that the profit and loss account or the cash flow of the company, the profit and loss stated are all true and fair. So this is what the companies or the auditors report states. So it's a very important part of the audit. So he has to take into consideration all these things, and he has the right to report to the members. If even if it is right, even if he is giving a qualified opinion or an unqualified opinion, he has the right to report to the members. Now the next subsection is section 143 subsection 3, which deals with the duty to report. That is, there are certain things that are very important for the auditor. He has to keep in mind while reporting, and he has to include all these points in his report. The first one is that he has to make sure that he has obtained all the information and explanation required by the auditor in accordance with the audit. That is, even if he has a single doubt relating to any part of the company's affairs, he needs to make an explanation or information regarding that. He has to collect all the possible information, and he has to make sure that to the best of his knowledge he has gained all the information required. Now if he has not acquired any kind of information or explanation, he needs to specify the details regarding that, and uh, since if there is any other mistakes relating to that, he can point out to that later on. Now, the second duty is that he has to make sure that the books of accounts are maintained by the company in accordance with the law, or in accordance with the provisions of the act. And also, he has examined all the books of accounts and all the things are properly maintained, even the branch accounts that were received by him, which he has not personally visited all these branches, but he has already gone through the books of accounts of those branches. So, he has to make sure all of those are properly taken care of. Now we'll go to the next duty. That is, if there is a branch of for that company, and the branch audit has been done by another auditor, not by the company auditor. It has been done the audit of the branch has been done by some other auditor, and the books of accounts and all the information has been transferred to this company auditor. Then he has to make sure that all the information received from such an auditor is all true and correct, and he has to and what and all information he has collected and involved in his audit, all these things has to be taken care of. He has to understand all these things properly, and see whether all these areas have been dealt with properly. Now, the next duty is that the auditor has to make sure that the company's balance sheet and the profit and loss accounts are are all prepared in accordance with the books of accounts and returns prepared by the company. So, all of these are in match. Now, the next duty is whether the opinion has any kind of adverse effect on the company, or whether in his opinion or his comments or his observation has some kind of adverse effect on the functioning of the company, whether any kind of malpractice has been taken place in the company. The next one is that whether in his opinion the financial statements comply with the accounting standard. That is, whether in his opinion that the financial statements are done or prepared in accordance with the accounting standards. And the next duty is that he has to check whether all the directors of that company are not disqualified as per the subsection 2 of section 164. The next duty is that if there is any qualification or any reservation or adverse mark relating to the maintenance of the accounts and other matters connected, whether there is any other adverse effect or any adverse opinion that he might have to provide in relation to the maintenance of accounts or any other matter as specified. The next duty is he has to check whether the internal financial control system and the operating effectiveness of the company are all proper and are properly maintained. That is, the internal control system has to be very strong, and the auditor has to make sure that the internal control system is going properly. and such other matter as may be prescribed is provided. So there can be any others extra matters that can be prescribed by the central government relating to such matter. Subsection 4 of section 143 states that if any adverse opinion or if any qualification has been provided by the auditor, and if any negative opinion has been provided by the auditor, uh, then the report shall state the reason also why he has provided such a qualification. He just has to provide with the reason. Now, subsection 5 of section 143 states that in case of a government company where the auditor is appointed by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, the Comptroller and Auditor General shall direct the auditor. So he shall direct the auditor regarding what all should be done in that audit and the manner of the audit that he has to conduct the audit. All these things shall be provided by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, and the auditor shall have to submit the copy of the audit report made by the auditor to the CNDG, and he has to include all those points that were provided by CNAG while doing the audit, and all those impact that he had while after following all the points as provided by the CNAG. He has to include all these points in his report and present that report to the CNDG. Now, subsection 6 of section 143 deals with supplement audit, which is conducted by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. That is, once the auditor sends him the copy of an audit report, in case of a government company, the auditor has sent the copy of the audit report to the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Now, within 60 days of the receipt of this report, the Comptroller and Auditor General of India has to conduct a supplementary audit of the financial statements. That is, he will send another auditor or another person, whomsoever it be, to the company, and the company is required to present with all the information and all the additional information that is required by such person. They have to provide all these things, and the Comptroller and Auditor General of India shall conduct such an audit, and he shall also comment upon such audit report. He has to provide a comment upon such audit report. Now, he the comment on such audit report or any supplement he has put forth on that audit report shall be personally sent to each and every person entitled to receive the audit report or audited financial statements. Whomsoever is entitled to receive the audited financial statement should also receive this comments given by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, and also such an a comment shall be placed before the AGM at the meeting, and the same schedule shall be followed, and the same things shall be followed in the case of how an audit report has been put forth. The same procedure shall be followed for such a or such a supplement put forward by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Now, as per section 143 subsection 7, the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, in case of a government company, uh, if he considers necessary, he can conduct a test audit of that company. And there are nothing much given in this section. It just states that if he finds it necessary to do so, he can conduct a test audit of that company. Now, as per section 143 subsection 8, which deals with branch audit, it states that where a company has a branch office somewhere in India or outside India, the audit shall be conducted by the auditor appointed as per the provisions of this act. That is, the company audit himself can conduct the audit of the branch also, or such an audit can be conducted by any other person who is qualified for appointment as an auditor in that company. It can be done by some other person also. In the case of in case of a branch which is situated outside the country, the audit can be done by any chartered accountant or any auditor who is qualified to do so, or any accountant or any other person who is qualified to do the audit. Now, the main part is that after the branch audit is completed, the branch auditor shall have to provide a report to the company auditor which states all the information required, or whatever information he has collected has to be included in that report before sending such a report to the company auditor. Now the next subsection is subsection 9 of section 143 states that every company, every auditor shall comply with the auditing standards before conducting the audit, or while conducting the audit whatsoever, he shall comply with the auditing standards. Now the next section is subsection is 10 of section 143, which states that the central government may prescribe the standards of auditing as recommended by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India after the consultation of NFRA, that is National Financial Reporting Authority. They recommend that, or they consult our ICAI consults with NFRA, and after receiving the recommendations by ICAI, the central government may prescribe the standards of auditing. Now, section 143, subsection 11 states that the central government may, after getting the consultation from NFRA, direct the auditor that his report shall also include such and such matter as may be specified. If he wants such and such matters to be prescribed, then the central government may ask the auditor to do so. The next subsection is subsection 12 of section 143. It states that during the course of the audit, if an auditor finds out that there is some kind of fraud happening in this company, or there is, if he believes with proof that such an offense is being taken place which involves fraud of amount exceeding rupees 1 crore, then he shall immediately report the matter to the central government within such and such time and such manner as may be prescribed by the central government. So, if there is any fraud taking place, being an auditor, the only thing that you need to do is report to the central government. Now, there is a common doubt that can arise in every single person. That is what is explained in the next subsection 13. It states that if a if an auditor reports to the central government regarding any fraud taking place in that company, he might fear that his duty or his rights might be contravened, or it might state that his duties and rights were also contravened during that audit period. But no, it shall not happen. His duty or any other thing, or no duty to which an auditor of a company may be subject to, shall be regarded as having been contravened, or it shall not be considered as not done if it has been done in good faith. If he has done it in good faith, that he didn't know anything of what it was going through, or what the company was going through, he had no idea about that. In that case, the government or the auditor may be no duty to which an auditor of the company may be subject to shall be regarded as having been contravened by the reason of his reporting the matter referred to in the above section. The last two subsections are subsection 14 and 15. Now, section 143, subsection 14 states that this provision of this section, the whole duties and rights shall also be applicable to the cost accountant in case of cost audit and the company secretary in case of secretarial audit also. Now, the last subsection of this section, that is section 143, subsection 15, states that if an auditor or the cost accountant or a company secretary does not comply with the provisions that was specified before regarding the duty of the auditor to report of on the fraud of done by the company to the central government. If he doesn't comply with such um, a provision, then he shall be punishable with a fine not less than rupees 1 lakh, but which may extend to 25 lakhs. So that is a fine he has to pay if he hides such a huge fact with the central government. Now, the next section is section 144, that is auditors not to render certain services. We mentioned about this section earlier while explaining or while discussing about the qualification and disqualification of auditors, where it was written that if an auditor renders certain services as provided in section 144, he shall be disqualified to be an auditor. So let's see what are those services that then auditors should not render. Now, there are certain services that are approved by the board of directors and the audit committee or the audit committee, and such services can be provided by the auditor, but such services shall not include the following given services. They are accounting and bookkeeping services, internal audit, design and implementation of any financial information system, actuarial services, investment advisory services, investment banking services, rendering of outsourced financial services, management services, and any other kind of service as may be prescribed. Now, say before the commencement of this act, if any auditor or audit firm had been performing such non audit services, then the auditor or the audit firm shall be given 1 year in total. That is, they have to comply with these provisions and refrain from doing such non audit services within one financial year or before the closure of the first financial year from the date of such commencement of the act. Now, for this purpose, in subsection, it has been given directly or indirectly. It states that in case of an auditor being an individual, if it's an individual auditor, directly or indirectly means it can be through himself or through his relative or any other person connected to or associated with such individual or any other person, be it through any entity or whatsoever, if that person has significant influence or control over some other entity, or if any other entity is using his trademark or his brand name is used by some other individual or a firm, then such all these people are directly and indirectly connected to this auditor or this individual. Now, in case of a firm, it can be his partner or through his parent or the firm's subsidiary or through associate entity or any other entity over which the company is having certain uh, specific control over that entity, then or if that firm is using any name or trademark or brand or any of these things are being used by its firm or its partners of that firm. In all these cases, it can be directly or indirectly connected to that individual or that firm. Now, the next section is the auditor to sign audit reports. That is section 145, which deals with auditor to sign the audit reports. Now, section 145 specifies that, as we all know, the main job of an auditor is to sign the auditor's report. And he shall also certify or sign the documents that state that all the documents provided by the company, he has to certify that all the documents provided by the company are provided in accordance with the provisions of the subsection 2 of section 141, and all the qualification observations inspections, all these things that he has included in the audit report shall be read before the company in the general meeting. It has to be read in front of every member in the general meeting, and it shall also be kept open to inspection by any member of the company. Now, section 146 deals with auditor to attend general meeting. Now, section 146 states that all the notices of the general meeting or any other communication relating to general meeting shall also be forwarded to the auditor of the company. He has the right to receive the notice of the general meeting. Now, the auditor shall, unless and otherwise exempted that by the company, that if the auditor doesn't want to go to the general meeting and or the company states that okay, company exempts that he need not come to the general meeting, unless and otherwise in that case, the auditor shall by himself or through a representative, and this such a representative shall also be qualified to work as an auditor. So either by himself or through his representative attend such general meeting, and he shall also have the right to be heard on any part of the business, right to be heard on any part of the business that concerns him as an auditor. So mostly all of the business parts shall be concerning him as an auditor. The next section is section 147 that deals with punishment for contravention. Now we shall deal with the punishments that has to be given to the company, the officer, or the auditor in case of contravention. In case of a company, if they contravene with any sections provided by the Act, then it shall have to pay a fine which shall not be less than rupees 25,000, which may extend to rupees 5 lakh. So it can be any fine depending on the voltage or on the weightage of the act that he has done on the weightage of the company. The fine can vary from 25,000 to 5 lakh. In the case of an officer, he shall be liable for imprisonment for a term that may extend to 1 year, or a fine which shall not be less than rupees 10,000 but shall extend to or may extend to rupees 1 lakh. Now, in case of an auditor, there can be cases where the auditor has not known regarding the contravention, or the sections that are applicable to him as section 139, 143, 144, or 145 has contravened any of these sections. Knowingly or unknowingly, he shall be liable for fine or imprisonment. In case if he has unknowingly done so, then he shall be liable for a fine not less than rupees 25,000 but may extend to rupees 5 lakh. Now, in case if he has done that act knowingly, or he has willfully done such an act in order to deceive the company or the shareholders of the company or the members of that company, if he has done it knowingly, then he shall be liable for an imprisonment which may extend to 1 year and a fine. Let me remind you, it shall also include a fine which shall not be less than rupees 1 lakh, which may extend to 25 lakhs. In case of an officer, it was an or. It can be either the imprisonment or the fine. But in case of an auditor, if he knowingly does so, then he can be having the imprisonment and a fine. Okay. Now, if the auditor has willfully or knowingly done some act and has contravened the provisions of the section, then he shall be liable to refund the remuneration received by him to the company and also pay for the damages to the company, all statutory bodies, or any other authority or any other person for whom the loss has arisen by creating such misleading statements. Whomever has found such loss or has such loss due to his misleading statements, the auditor is liable to pay for the damages to all these people. Now, as regards to the payment of damages by the auditor to the company and statutory bodies or any other authority, the central government shall specify to the statutory body or authority or the officers to ensure the prompt payment of the damages to the company. Now, after the payment has been made to the company or the authorities or any statutory body, then they have to file a report with the central government in respect of making such damages in manner as may be specified by the said notification, has been specified by the central government. Now, in the case of an audit firm, if any partner or the partners of the firm have acted in a fraudulent manner or colluded in relation to the company affairs of the company, they have acted in a fraudulent manner, whether it is a civil act or a criminal act, whichever is provided by the act, such an act shall be of the partner and the partners or the partners concerned, and also of the firm jointly and severally. That is, totally all the persons of the firm shall be equally liable for such an act.
So we have come to the final section of our session today, that is cost audit, section 148. So what is cost audit? Cost audit is just an audit process which is mainly used for the proper verification or utilization of the utilization of material, labor and other items of cost, and to verify that the cost of manufacture or cost of production of any article is properly taken on the basis of the accounts, and all these items relating to the cost shall be done in the cost audit. Now, central government might or may by order specify the audit of items of cost. That is, the central government might specify what kind of items of cost shall be taken for audit in certain companies. Now, let's see who are all applicable, or which companies are applicable for cost audit. It states that domestic or foreign company except micro or small enterprises who are engaged in the production of goods or providing services, whose overall turnover from all its products and services, that is, if they are having different range of products, it is an overall turnover from all its products and services is more than 35 crore in the preceding financial year. Okay, in the preceding financial year, not that financial year. Now, the companies can be divided into two. One is regulated and non-regulated sectors. Now, cost audit shall be applicable for these two sectors in the following manner. In case of regulated sector, if the annual turnover from all its products and services during the immediately preceding financial year is more than 50 crore, or the aggregate turnover of individual product or service is rupees 25 crore or more. In either of these two cases, it can be considered as a regulated sector, and in the regulated sector, if these two are applicable, then they are applicable for cost audit. In case of non-regulated sector, annual turnover from all its products and services during immediately preceding financial year is rupees 100 crore or more, and the aggregate turnover of the individual product or service is rupees 35 crore or more. Now, section 148 subsection 3 states that the cost audit shall be conducted only by a cost accountant in practice. Who shall appoint the cost accountant? It shall be the board of directors who appoint the cost accountant to conduct the cost audit, but the remuneration of such cost accountant shall be determined by the members in such manner as may be prescribed. And to be precise, or to be specified, no person appointed under section 139 that we discussed earlier, that is the auditor of the company, shall be appointed as the cost auditor of the company. That is, an auditor who is working as a auditor of the company cannot be appointed as the cost auditor of that company also. Another point is that the cost auditor shall comply with all the cost auditing standards, and subsection 4 of section 148 says that the audit conducted under this section, that is cost audit, shall be conducted in addition to the audit that is specified before, that is in addition to the company audit specified in section 143. Now, as per rule 6 of the company's cost records and audit, an auditor has to be appointed within 180 days of the commencement of every financial year. Has to be appointed within 180 days of the commencement of every financial year. Now, before such appointment, the consent of such cost auditor has to be obtained. And what are the details should be involved or included in that consent? The first thing is, he is eligible for the appointment. He should include that he has to state that he is eligible for appointment, and he satisfies the criteria provided in section 141, which states the qualification and disqualification of auditors, and the proposed appointment is within the limits laid down by the authority or within the rules and norms laid down by the authority. And at last, the list of proceedings against him stated are true and correct. That means that the consent should also state all the list of proceedings against him if there are any. Now, every company shall inform the cost auditor regarding his appointment, and the company has to inform the auditor before his appointment, and file a notice of such an appointment with the central government. They have to file a notice with the central government when within 30 days of the board meeting, within 30 days from the board meeting in which he was appointed, or within a period of 180 days from the commencement of the financial year, whichever is earlier. Okay, and such a notice should be made in an electronic mode in form CRA2 along with prescribed fees. Now, the auditor can be also removed from the office before his expiry of his term through a board resolution itself. He doesn't need a special resolution, he just needs a board resolution after giving him a reasonable opportunity to be heard. Now, any casual vacancy in the office, so we have already discussed regarding casual vacancy earlier. Now, any casual vacancy in the office of the cost auditor shall be filled by the board of directors within 30 days of occurrence of such vacancy. Within 30 days, the occurrence of vacancy, and the company shall inform the central government in form CRA2 within 30 days. That is in case of appointment of an auditor also, and also in the case where the casual vacancy is filled. In both these cases, the central government shall be given notice within 30 days in form CRA2. Now, let's see who appoints the auditor and who decides the remuneration for the auditor. In case of company with audit committee, as we all know, the board shall appoint the auditor by receiving the recommendation from audit committee. That is, the board shall receive the recommendation from audit committee and they shall appoint a cost auditor. And obviously the audit committee shall decide the remuneration or recommends the remuneration, which shall be approved by the board. That's it. Now, in case where there is no audit committee, the board shall appoint the auditor and the board shall also decide the remuneration. Now, section 148 subsection 5 states that the qualifications, disqualifications, rights, duties, obligations, etc., which were specified in this area or that we have discussed before, which were applicable to the company auditor, shall also be applicable to the cost auditor, and it is the duty of the company, or the company is liable to provide with all the informations required by the cost auditor regarding his audit. And it is also provided that the cost auditor shall provide with the report of the audit on which he has conducted the audit to the board of directors of the company. Now, section 148 subsection 6 states the rules regarding submission of the cost audit report. The cost auditor has to submit his report to both the board of directors of the company and also to the central government. Now to the board of directors, the cost auditor shall submit the cost audit report in form CRA3. He shall give this report to the board of directors within a period of 180 days from the closure of the financial year, not the commencement, the closure of the financial year. Now to the central government, the company shall give to the central government within 30 days from the date of receipt of the copy of audit report. That is, the auditor shall provide the audit report to the board of directors. Now the company, after the receipt of the audit report, within next 30 days they shall provide the to the central government with such report along with full information explanation on every reservation or qualification contained therein in form CRA4. So let me correct the point which I just told before, that the auditor has to provide his cost audit report only to the board of directors. The board of directors or the company provides the audit report to the central government in form CRA4. Now section 148 subsection 7 states that after the cost audit report has been given to the central government, and now central government verifies all the report that has been provided, and if he still feels that he needs a further explanation or he needs further opinion or information regarding the so-called reports, then he can ask for such further information and explanation from the company, and the company shall furnish the same within such time and such period as may be specified by the government. Now section 148 also specifies certain cost or certain companies where the cost audit rules does not apply. Now these are the classes of company where cost audit rules does not apply. They are companies whose revenues from exports exceed 75% of its total revenue. Those companies which are operating in special economic zone, and those companies which are engaged in generation of electricity for captive consumption through captive generating plants. Now section 148 subsection 8 states the penal provisions in case of default. That is, if there is any default taken place in or made in complying with the provisions of this section, then the company and every officer of the company who is in default shall be punishable in the manner as provided in subsection 1 of section 147, which we just discussed earlier. That is, every company shall be liable to a fine or has to pay a fine of rupees 25,000, not less than 25,000, which may extend to rupees 5 lakh. And in case of an officer, he can be liable for an imprisonment of up to 1 year or a fine of rupees of amount not less than rupees 10,000, which may extend to rupees 1 lakh. In case of a cost auditor of the company who is in default shall be punishable in the manner as provided in subsection 2 to 4 of sections 147, which we already discussed. That is, if he has done willingly, knowingly or unknowingly. If he has done it unknowingly, then he shall be liable to pay an amount which shall be not less than 25,000, but which may also extend to an amount of rupees 5 lakh. And if he has done knowingly in order to deceive the company and other authorities of the company, then he shall be liable to an imprisonment of at least 1 year, not more than 1 year, up to 1 year, or fine up to fine which shall not be less than 1 lakh rupees, which may extend to 25 lakh rupees. So these are some of the provisions relating to
the penal provisions relating to the default of all the provisions of this section. B shall be similar to that of the penal provisions of the common auditor or the common company auditor. So with that, we have come to the end of today's study circle. I hope I was able to convey all the points clearly.